Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Pop Sub Club. I'm Nick, and I am here with actor, the first live-action Human Torch himself, Jay Underwood. Jay, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Flame on.
Rock and roll. I love you guys. I gotta say, when I saw you guys were at the premiere for First Steps, it warmed my heart so much to see you guys. And I also loved your outfit. Like, you really just stuck with the flame attire through and through, and that was the best.
I thought, why not? So were you there? Were you at the premiere?
Oh, I wish. I
Oh,
wish
you're
I
watching
was.
it. Okay, I got you. Um, yeah, I thought, how many times is this going to happen? And I thought, well, I was Johnny Storm, so I can wear a flame tie and my flaming Converse, and there you go.
How did it feel being like literally the only, I think out of all of the cameos of the four of you, you were the only one that got to interact with your character in the film. That must have been pretty cool.
Yeah, when they called and told us that they wanted to put us in the film, I mean, first we were all just absolutely elated. I mean, it was just the greatest phone call to get.
Mhm.
And the producer, Grant Curtis, said to us, he says, we're not quite sure yet how we're going to do this or what we're going to do. We all knew that they had finished principal photography back at last Thanksgiving time. And so, and this was this last May. So it was just going to be a one-day shoot. We knew it would be probably, green screen kind of stuff, and just they would be cutting us in. It wasn't like there were going to be the other actors there or anything like that. So so when we went to our wardrobe fitting, they tried all kinds of different outfits and things, just period outfits mostly. But then they came up with this idea, which is where myself and then Michael Bailey Smith is standing next to me. And they said, hey, yeah, there's a sequence where Johnny, takes in all the power or flames and stuff from a power plant being on fire. And he gives a little salute, and so we're going to have you give a little salute back. And I thought, oh, that's sweet. I love that.
So cool.
It really, it was. And so they kept that in. And then we had, for our first shot of the day, it was kind of fun. And they even had the behind the scenes crew there on the set that day to film us, and so they kind of had us all walk together to the set. And we did one of those deals where it's Mark Gaddis's show on the First Steps thing, and people are saying, thank you, Fantastic Four. And so there's a quick little bubble that rises up, which is the four of us saying that, it's kind of a, if you didn't know, you probably wouldn't pick up on that. And then the other fun thing that I just noticed, I've seen it twice, and I was recently in Istanbul, and the friend that I was visiting said, man, we need to go see your movie. So we went and saw it in the theater, and we're watching the credits, and it was nice that they gave us a credit, but then when they were doing the main cast credits and it said Joseph Quinn, and they had like 4 different pictures, from the movie. My picture from the power plant thing was one of them.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's cool. I didn't see that the first time. It was really nice of Matt Shackman, the director, to just go as far as they did to make sure all of this happened,
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And I think it was like 2 weeks before the opening. Now it was about 3 or 4 weeks before. And I texted the producer, Grant, because you never know, you shoot this stuff and shucks, John Malkovich. John Malkovich was supposed to be in the movie as the
Red Ghost, right?
The Red Ghost, exactly. And he was there at the reshoot day when we were filming, and they had him doing some stuff.
Oh wow!
And so I mean, they ended up having to cut his whole bit out of the movie. I think Shackman had said we already had so many characters and so much going on, and it just was like a whole other storyline that it wasn't meshing in there. So anyway, you never know. So I called Grant and I said, yeah, are we in the movie, or are we on the cutting room floor? He goes, nope, all 4 of you are in.
That's the best. I gotta say, I thought that it was, I grew up on Fantastic Four ever since I was a kid. Even when I was like on this kind of impromptu but super fun journey of getting back into my love of the Fantastic Four, because I was always a Spider-Man kid growing up, but the FF was always like just in my corner, and I it never clicked until like this movie came. And I grew up with the 2005 film. I saw the 2015 one. I saw your film as well, and it just was so cool to me that of all of the Fantastic Fours, and even Rebecca was telling me that your film was the one that influenced that the most. And on top of that, you guys got the most nod to it. And I thought that was the coolest thing, because by and large, I was even telling my fiance yesterday, from script to screen, your film was so faithful to the essence of the Fantastic Four in a way that I don't think any of the other movies are going to have. And I just, it made me love this film even more that they recognize
that's really cool,
right?
Yeah, and I think when we were filming the first one, the director Oli Sassoon got the main cast together.
Mm-hmm.
And it was his kind of locker room pep talk. Right before we started shooting, he said, "Gang, here's the deal. We know what we're up against. We have $1 million here, and this movie, now that's back in '94, so maybe this movie needs 40 million, to really make it, what it needs to be."
Yeah.
So he said, but that being said, we already have a built-in audience. The comic world is going to know about it, and they're going to go see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's we really want to do our best, and so we will control the things that we can control, right? So there's a certain amount of control with script and stuff. The script came back, and script was already pretty solid, so that was really pretty cool. And he said, you guys, man, just take your characters and make it real. I mean, just go to town, do your best, do your work,
Mm-hmm.
and read the comic books, and let's just do our best to create the comic book on the screen. And he says, and I'll do what I can as your director, to knowing that we're fighting against the money aspect. We're not going to have the effects that we would like to have, but we'll all do our best. And you know what? It was a great talk, and we all took it to heart. We all became really close, because when you're working on a low budget film, and especially a Roger Corman film, I mean, there's no perks and things, there's no sweet dressing rooms, and you're in this warehouse that should be condemned, and there's rats running through the sound stage, and there's ants in the dressing rooms, and it's just what it is, right? You know what you're signing on for, so it's not like anyone should be disappointed when they show up to the set. And but again, we all loved Oli. He was our director, he was our ringleader, he was our coach, and we all just stuck together, and we worked hard, and we took it seriously, and I appreciate what you said, and I think the same. I think in terms of just trying to get at the essence of the characters and trying to get the comic book on the screen. And I like that it kind of, it ended up being this kind of over the top, stylized. I always compare it to the Batman TV series when I tell people about it. It's like pow, whap,
yes,
punk, and that kind of thing. And that's okay. And that's okay. And you're right. I think. Well, here's the other little fun piece of this. Kind of because of what you mentioned. So then, when everything happened and ours gets pulled and the guy that had the rights sells it to 20th Century Fox, and they start making their big budget ones. Yeah. Let's face it, none of those did the business that they should have done as Marvel's flagship comic, the Fantastic
Marvel's first
Four.
Family.
Exactly.
Family not gonna work.
That's right. That's right. And so Joseph Culp, who played our Dr. Doom, he had the great answer for that. He says it's the curse of the Fantastic Four. He said, because proper homage has never been paid to the original. They always treated us like, let's keep them hidden in a closet somewhere. And because of that, he said, that's why each one has floundered in its own way. And so when Kevin Feige stepped in and made the call, with Grant Curtis to offer us the parts and to say, we want you guys in the movie, it was like the curse is broken.
And then how about that? 4th time's the charm. It took 4 times. And then finally we nailed it. Like, how about that? That's so funny.
I love too what they did with it, what Matt Shackman did with it. I mean, he's an original idea guy. When you look at something like WandaVision and you see what he did with that, and then this, I love the stylized look to it. The art direction's great. I love that they put it in the kind of the 60s motif. I mean, they just made it different, Yeah.
I tell everyone whenever, like everyone that I've spoken to, and I've told to my friends and the audience, whoever is listening to these have probably heard it ad nauseum. I grew up on a little bit of the 90s cartoon, but a lot of the 60s Hanna-Barbera Fantastic Four cartoon. I'd always get up before school and watch that. And I would always tell everyone that is the vibe we need for a Fantastic Four movie, that type of sci-fi adventure. And at the end of this one, when they show like their own animated version of it, and they have a shot that completely homages that cartoon, I was like the happiest camper in the world. Like it was
so what they shot, it was original.
Yeah, it was.
Stuff at the end was original.
Yeah, it was all original, but what they did was they took the four heads of the Fantastic Four and then the four coming through in the middle. That exact shot is in the intro of the 60s cartoon, but they just redid it with these new characters. And it
cool. I just didn't pick up on that, Nick.
Yeah, it's I don't know if many people, that show's kind of lost media now a little bit.
Right.
And so I don't think a lot of people in general have I only found that because I was one of those kids that just grew up with content always in my face. Like I'm a true late millennial or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what I but I know that I love a lot.
You got to figure it out.
Yeah, I do some math. Like 1994, what's that out? But so I absolutely love the vibe they went for. But one of the things that I like to do on this show is not just talk about a specific film or specific film you're in, but talk about about my guests, like what you guys do, who you are, and what you're about. And one of those things I love to explore is your history. And so I was wondering if for the audience you could share like your story for how you got into acting, and kind of, I guess we can use Fantastic Four as a benchmark. Like what led you to eventually landing the role of Johnny Storm?
Sure. I was that kid growing up that I was always doing magic shows for the neighborhood kids. In fact, you notice my shirt. So I have my Star Wars 1977. And after I went and saw it, and I have one of the original large size comic books that were in Toys R Us in 1977 when it came out. And I think I have two of those. And so I got my friends together. I said, we gotta do this we weren't making movies back then. So we should do this like a play, we'll do it act it out. And we made an R2-D2 with a barrel over my friend with his roller skates on, and stuff. So that was me. I was that kid that was always doing that kind of stuff. And then I grew up in East Bay of San Francisco in a place called Hayward, and they had a community theater there, and they gave kids acting classes. And so I started taking the kids acting classes in Hayward and doing shows. And that was like the acting bug just bit at that point. And I just loved it. And so then I just kind of worked my way around the Bay Area. I worked at a theater in Oakland. I went to the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, so I got a little bit more classic training. That was still as a youth. And then I got hooked up through them with a school in Minneapolis called the Children's Theater Company. So it was a professional theater company, world renowned for taking children's literature, children's storybooks, and recreating them for the stage. And so they had a performing arts school. So I went there for 3 years, my last 3 years of high school. And you're just eating, sleeping, and breathing theater, and they wanted you to be a well-rounded performer. So you had your acting classes, but you had dance and movement classes, and you had voice and singing classes. And then all the students you always had to work on the crew for one of their shows. And that was a really cool thing because it taught you how to work as a team. It taught you that, hey, you're not above anybody just because you got the lead in this play, because next week you're backstage pushing scenery on and stuff like that. So it was a humbling experience too. So anyway, when in Minneapolis, they do a lot of commercials, a lot of industrial films, things like that over the years. And then when this is back in the 80s, 83, 84, 85, when Hollywood or New York wanted to find fresh faces or new talent for something, they'd do these little casting searches, and they'd go to places like Chicago, and they'd go to Dallas, and they'd go to Minneapolis. And so I started getting auditions because all the kids in our theater company had an agent. So I got an agent and started getting some auditions. And that's what finally hit, was one of these films that was coming through. And so I did this movie called The Desert Bloom. It was with John Voight and Jo Beth Williams, Ellen Barkin, Annabeth Gish. It was her first movie. It was my first movie. And it was kind of like an art house film. It had a theatrical release, but it played in theaters, like Berkeley and San Francisco, and just, a little more artsy kind of places. And Robert Redford was the executive producer. The writer director, he was out of Redford's Sundance Institute. And then Johnny Carson was one of the producers as well. So it was a really cool experience. But that was my first part. Did the movie in Arizona, went back to Minneapolis to school, and then scored my first leading part in a movie called The Boy Who Could Fly. And so I played the boy. We filmed that up in Vancouver, Canada over a summer, came down for LA for a month of special effects filming. And that came out in the theaters too, in '86. And that became then my big calling card to go ahead and move down to Los Angeles to try and just kind of strike while the iron was hot. It was either that, it was one coast or the other. I'd been accepted to NYU to study drama there. And I was literally packing my bags when I got a call from a manager in Los Angeles that wanted to represent me out there. And he said, "Hey, why don't you give it a shot? If you're game." And I thought, yeah, it makes sense. When the movie's coming out, you get these opportunities and you gotta jump on it. So came out here instead and just started getting work, just started working and, had the door was open. I was booking things. And so then to get to the Fantastic Four, you got to fast forward, not even 10 years, because that was '86 when I started that. So we made it in whatever it was, 92, end of 92, beginning of 93. And so I get a call from my manager, and he's all excited. He is like flipping out. He's like, "I got you this audition. You're gonna audition for Johnny Storm, the Fantastic Four." I'm sure it was like crickets on my end, right? I was not like the big comic kid, unlike you. I think I had heard of the Fantastic Four, but growing up, I was I read Mad comics and Cracked, and I remember reading Archie comics, and that was it. That was the that I read, and so I think I kind of put a little damper on his excitement. I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, that's cool." He's like, "No, you don't understand. This is the Fantastic Four." I said, "Okay, all right, fine." So went in, did the audition, and why? So before the audition, of course, I rounded up some comics because I got a little bit of what I was doing here. And so I kind of did my take on Johnny Storm, and, went in there and did it. And they hired me, and they said, "Okay, now we need to dye your hair." So I just said, at the time I had hair, and but it was just kind of a normal brown kind of color. So so I go down to the place to get my hair dyed, and that was an experience because my scalp wasn't taking too well to the peroxide that they were putting in there, and it started blistering and just got all funky. And so then they had to just kind of basically highlight my whole head with blonde highlights and make it blonde. And
is my head actually supposed to be on fire? Or
it was. I don't know if you remember that scene, and it was Spike Lee, and it was Spike Lee's character, and was it Malcolm X? And he goes in to get his hair peroxide, and the same thing, it starts burning his scalp, and he's like freaking out in the chair, and he's bouncing around, and it was that kind of thing. It was like I could only take it so much longer. I'm like, "Okay, I think you got to wash it out." I think. So, but yeah, and then we started filming. But that takes you up to that anyway.
Well, I think that is quite an awesome story. And, before touching on the Fantastic Four, I feel like I wouldn't be doing my fiance a service if I didn't mention the fact that one of the movies that actually brought the two of us together without realizing it was we both grew up on Uncle Buck. Yeah. And, I grew up on John Candy in general with my family, and my fiance, she loves Uncle Buck so much, love John Candy. And when we both realized, because I am awful with faces. I remember I have a childhood friend in first grade, and she never went to my school. And I saw her, I think, in the third grade, and she's waving to me. And I looked at her, I'm like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "What's happening?" One of my closest friends, I didn't recognize her. So I'm terrible with faces. So when I put two and two together, because there's actually another thing that you were part of with Young Indiana Jones. When I put two and two together with that, my brain just exploded. But I got to say, before getting into things, with Uncle Buck, how was that experience? Because I feel like it's not every day you get to have an experience playing opposite John Candy in a movie that is so beloved.
That was another unreal experience. It really was. If you ask me what were the favorite jobs that I did, I'd probably say The Boy Who Could Fly, and then I'd probably say Uncle Buck. Definitely. So that one, when my agent at the time, I was with an agency, and the agency represented Candy. So that was kind of a cool thing, you know. So we kind of knew that I would at least probably get an audition here, you know, for this deal. But what happened was, when the audition came up, I was kind of surprised they even were willing to see me, because my character Bug was originally written as a punk rocker. And man, my look, like even Johnny Storm, you know, it's just, I'm the all-American, you know, nice guy next door. That's as far from whatever. And so I thought, okay, for the audition, if I go in there and I'm just looking like Jay, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So I called two friends of mine. One was a makeup artist, and one was a friend that I'd gone to school with in Minneapolis, who went through the whole punk scene in Minneapolis, you know? And I said, do you still have any of your stuff? He wasn't in the punk scene anymore. And he goes, yeah, actually I do. And so he gave me some of his stuff. And then actually, now that I think about it, I had done a movie, an ABC movie, after school special called The Day My Kid Went Punk. And I think I had some stuff from that as well. So then my makeup artist friend, you know, just kind of did everything, hair, makeup, kind of looking a little more like Sid Vicious, you know, and I thought, okay, we've got this part down. Now, when I go to this audition, and the first one was just to be put on tape, you know, with the casting person, but I thought, I'm going to go in character from beginning to end, and I'm not going to break character. I'm just not. I just didn't want to risk anything. I didn't want to risk them seeing Jay, you know? Yeah. And so I did. Even the time I walked in the waiting room, and how I interacted with the secretary, and then going into the casting and doing everything, even when they weren't filming me, I just played the part. So I get the call back, and I'm all excited, and the callbacks with Candy and John Hughes. And like you, I'm a huge Candy fan. I'm a huge John Hughes fan, you know, Breakfast Club and 16 Candles and Pretty in Pink and all those. Well, actually, Pretty in Pink. Yeah, actually, that had already come out. And so, oh man, I'm pumped. I'm so excited. And my makeup artist friend is out of town. And I'm like, what are we going to do? You need to do my makeup. She's like, oh my gosh, I know. Okay. I'm going to find somebody else, and then I'm going to walk them through it, like on the phone, you know, and then tell them how to do everything.
That's so funny.
So we did. So I go to the callback. It was evening time. It was over at Universal, and same thing. I just thought, from the time I walk in to the time I leave, I'm not letting up. And so, you know, and that was tough to do, because I mean, I just want to talk to Candy and Hughes and, you know, just hang with them a little bit. You know? And so I remember at one point we're just having small talk, and I had this necklace on. It had like some animal jaw, and Candy's like, so what's that thing around your neck there? Is that like some kind of jaw of a? I said, it's a jaw of a rat, man. He goes, oh, that's very interesting. That's really, you know, and just whatever, you know. And so I'm doing all this stuff, and then lo and behold, I get the job.
That's awesome.
I'm just like floored. And so the thing takes place in Chicago. Hughes shoots all of his stuff in Chicago, and so they fly me out there. We do the deal. They fly me out there, and when I get out there, I was sorry, I'm just turning off my phone there. No, I was invited to come out early for some rehearsal stuff. And Hughes pulls me aside and he says, so, you know, I'm kind of thinking the punk rock stuff it's on its way out, you know? And that was Hughes, right? I mean, he just knew
that's impressive, next. Honestly.
Yeah, what was kind of hip or happening with young people. And he said, what I've noticed lately is this kind of almost like bohemian kind of take. It's not goth. But he says, but some of it's dark color stuff. But he says, like even Bug, it was his idea. He says like tweed, you know, jacket and like tweed pants rolled up and a turtleneck and some beret thing, you know, and whatever. And I remember I had these really cool glasses that are really funky, and they actually were given to me by Elton John. So they were just kind of weird, funky, and he liked them, and he goes, those would work great. And I said, cool. So they the wardrobe people found out where, you know, who made them and whatever, and got a few more pairs, so we had those, and
That's awesome.
And so we started doing the rehearsal stuff, and and Candy is just, he is just great. I mean, he's kind of like what you'd think. He's just the big teddy bear of a guy. He's just a sweet man, right? He's not always doing his comic shtick, but he's just, he's got a great sense of humor. But he just was, he was warm, he was kind, he was just enjoyable. Yeah. And I mean, it just couldn't have been, I was in heaven. And John Hughes, the way that he shoots stuff is, he shoots crazy amounts of footage, just crazy amounts. So he'll always shoot the script, whatever that is, for the scene. And then he loves doing improv. And you would just do improv and try new things and different things. And I mean, he would spend forever. So he hired me for 2 weeks. We never shot a lick of film on me in those 2 weeks. He was doing other stuff, and it was just taking longer. So they flew me back to Los Angeles. They redid my deal. They flew me back out. And I got to finally get the cameras rolling. And man, I love the way he worked. I loved it. It was just like you're a kid in the candy store, and you totally trust him, and he's happy to let you do stuff. And so when we got to the scene in the trunk, for instance, a lot of that was just improv, and I think probably the scene probably doubled in size just because of the improvisation stuff, and they put the piece of tape on me, and we're filming literally in freezing cold Skokie, Illinois. And at night, and I'm in the back of a trunk, and I'm in my t-shirt. I mean, we weren't on a sound stage or anything like that. And they say, and they duct tape my hands, and they put the duct tape on my face, and put a wad of tissue in my mouth. And so I'm convinced that they used the first take, because when he reaches down and he rips that tape off, oh my word, it hurts so much. It was like he ripped off my skin, and I screamed, and I throw the thing. I'm like, and I'm screaming at him, and this and that and the other, and so it was funny because the director John Hughes had cut, and the makeup people like rushed over to me. They're like, "Oh my gosh, we were watching that, and it looked like it was so painful." I'm like, "Yeah, that would kind of hurt." They said, we just didn't even think. We didn't think, So then they Vaseline my lip all up and just put the corners of the tape for the next take, So, but so it was a treat. I mean, it was just a treat.
That's awesome. That's such a great experience after having. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. That's so cool.
Thanks for asking. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Now, one of the things that I noticed when you went on record saying was that one of your most favorite, if not your most favorite role, was in The Boy Who Could Fly. Yep. Now, I know that movie itself also came with some challenges in bringing that character to life. So just to kind of tie it to Fantastic Four, what would you say were the different challenges between bringing a character like Johnny Storm to life versus bringing a character in The Boy Who Could Fly to life?
To me, that's kind of like apples and oranges. It's interesting too, because I look back at my early career, and I told you I played like the nice guy next door, or I played the guy that you thought was the nice guy next door, who then maybe turns out to be, the darker kind of deal. But what I also noticed, I played a lot of not superhero, but kids with powers and things like that. So the boy could fly, he could fly, and then I did, I played the Kryptonite kid on an episode of Superboy, and so I had these cool powers. In fact, that's where I developed my Johnny Storm throw fireballs, was in as the Kryptonite kid. I had to throw these Kryptonite fireballs, and so I kind of came up with this motion, and I just used that for Johnny Storm when he would throw fire, that kind of thing. And then I played I did 3 movies for the Disney Channel called Not Quite Human, where I played a robot. I played an android with Alan Thicke, so I had I got cast as all these like kids with superpower kind of stuff, and then Johnny Storm, of course. So I don't know that there was any real connection that I could find between how I came up with the character for The Boy Who Could Fly and Johnny Storm. I mean, they're two, like I said, Johnny Storm's like the opposite of Eric Gibb. Eric Gibb was totally introverted, didn't speak, was autistic.
Mhm.
And Johnny's more outgoing and kind of impetuous and a bit of a hothead,
Yeah,
and and a kind of ladies' man, and so
just
just
a chance to flex some different muscles.
totally. And that's what I do like about the career that I've had is I love the variety that I've been able to that was offered me, that I
Absolutely.
could play a lot of different kinds of things.
Yeah, and that's always got to be a treat.
Yeah.
So like when playing Johnny Storm, what was some of the most fun aspects you had in researching the character? Because you said you got to read, you really like got inundated in the world of
Yeah,
fantastic.
and that was it. I mean, it was mostly just going to the comics, and using that. And I think once we started filming and stuff, I don't know, I wouldn't say I was overly obsessed with the comics. I
Yeah.
kind of used them initially, and then once I was where I was kind of going with the character, Oli, director, was happy with that, and so we just kind of kept plugging away. I mean, we only shot for, it was like 3 or 4 weeks. It wasn't a long shoot.
Yeah, that's cool
Kind
though.
of kind of deal. Yeah, and then of course, and then we're on set, and so Oli, he knew, you know, we knew when there would be effects, and he knew what he was hoping for, and so
Mhm.
yeah, like he would say, you're gonna blast this wall, and you're gonna do the fire thing, and it's
Mhm.
gonna come through your hands, and you're gonna make the hole in the wall, at the end. So he was pretty good at being able to tell us what we were looking for. When I hold my hand up and to the doctor, and I go, I don't know, I just say, flame on, and then you just start reacting because you know that they're going to have flames coming off your hand. That was one thing when I did watch the new one. I thought the effects were great. I loved what they did with the flame effects for Johnny, how he could just even be in the apartment, and just,
Yeah,
have fire going on, with his hand or whatever. I thought it looked great.
it was so cool. There was one part in that movie that someone mentioned on Reddit that I just didn't realize because my brain knew something was going on, but it couldn't comprehend what was happening. And it was when Galactus was there and Sue like made the force field, and it kind of acted like a magnifying glass for Johnny's flames when he was shooting him through the force field. And I'm like, oh, that is so cool.
Oh,
Like
I'll have
that
to
is the
watch for that
coolest
next
thing.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was sick. I'm with you though. I love the effects in that movie. I love watching the fire effects so much.
Yeah.
It was so cool. But I'm trying to think what else. So one of the things that I always liked about Fantastic Four was kind of the character dynamics between the family and just seeing how they operate. And I found that, of all of the eras of Johnny Storm that we see in the films as a whole, your era of Johnny Storm, it really captures just the youthfulness of the character in the best ways. And I was wondering, like, was it hard for you to kind of work opposite the other cast in terms of bringing that to life, or did Rebecca kind of like really bring to life the older sister vibe, and then
Yeah.
Alex
So,
really brought Reed to life?
right. I think, like I said, my interpretation from the comic was one. So I'm a high energy person anyway.
Mhm.
And so I took that to heart. I saw that in Johnny. That was just, and I'm trying to think, when you look back at the comic, if that would be something that you would necessarily get from the comic for Johnny. But that was the choice that I made, was that, he's outgoing and stuff, and he's personal, but he's just kind of bouncing around, he's got a lot of energy, kind of thing,
Mhm.
and I think that plays into why too, his ability of the flame. Well, because he's a hothead, and maybe because he's got this energy too, he's got this energy that's just under the surface, kind of thing. And so the times generally, when all the reviews and people's comments through the years about our version, they were all generally positive. I mean, everybody acknowledged, it's $1 million movie. So yes, there's a lot that they needed to do differently. But in terms of when they would talk about the actors, the few times that I think people had an issue with my character, and that was one they picked up on this, that like I was almost too high energy, just and kind of like eating the scenery kind of thing, just a little over the top maybe. I mean, that was a choice. It was just a choice I made, and you live with it, and I'm fine with it.
It's
But
funny though that you say that, because in my, I watched the '94 Fantastic Four probably when I was a sophomore in high school, maybe a freshman, because I just found it. I didn't even know, like, I heard it wasn't released. So in my brain, I'm like, well, I guess it doesn't really exist. And then I found out it did. And I was like, this is real. And I watched the whole thing. And after the whole movie, I'm like, I guess it was real. But no, I had a blast with it. And I think it's kind of created this almost like, I don't know if it's like a Mandela effect or just something weird of, I think that all of my expectations on the four that I think might have come from the early issues, which I have read, I think a lot of it just came influenced from your film. I didn't realize it because my definitive Doctor Doom is Joseph Culp's Doom. Like the way you play Johnny is the way that I always kind of picture Johnny. Like I grew up with the 2005 one, Chris Evans' Human Torch, there's a place for him too. But for me, you know, hot shot older brother loves a thrill, that our younger brother, that is what you brought to life in my head. So I'm sitting here as you tell me the story and I'm like, wait a second, is everything I know about the Fantastic Four just from this movie? And I didn't even realize, like, all my expectations set from this movie.
And you know what? Yeah, I agree with you. Like now that I'm thinking about it too, I just naturally look at our movie as being kind of the standard, right? Like I don't think back necessarily to the comic book anymore. You know? So you're right. When I'm watching the new one, I'm looking at it and comparing the characters to the characters we played.
It's so funny. Like, and it's the weirdest thing because, and that's what I love about the fact, like how whenever I've talked to anyone with these films, aside from Oli and Craig, you know, you guys weren't super into the comics. And I'm the type of fan where I'm like, I think that's great because what keeps these characters alive is outside influence. And I think that that's what helps to keep a property alive and keep evolving these characters. So I think that it was kind of like a benchmark of where things were in 1994 and kind of establish this is what it is into now. And I think it's even more interesting at how you guys came at a time where not only was Marvel not big in the movie space,
right?
But the only thing, like Batman Forever was next year. Batman Returns was 2 years before that. The Superman movies had finished up. Like the Fantastic Four, like did that ever hit you guys like on set? Like, did anyone ever realize like of all of the superhero movies out there, you guys were doing the Fantastic Four? And that's kind of like wild considering only Batman and Superman were around at the time.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting time because you're right. So Marvel, even DC, super or comic book movies, they were not a mainstay at that point. You know, the Supermans, had come out and had nice success, and Batman had come out, I think, with Michael Keaton, if I remember, and had the success there. But they weren't like the next hot thing. It wasn't like everybody was clamoring to make the next Marvel or DC comic, right? They weren't kind of seen as a proven commodity at that point. That's why Bernd Eichinger, the guy who had the rights, you know, was in the position that he was in because he had been trying to sell the rights and nobody was hot to buy it. And so he had to go into production on our version in order to keep the rights that he would eventually sell them to, you know, hopefully a high bidder, which he did. But yeah, so I think in doing it, we knew that we had a built-in audience in the comic world. And I think when we started to realize that, oh, there's some buzz now going on out there, the word's getting out, was there was a magazine at the time called Film Threat. And they had come out and they were pretty popular, and they came to our set and they did this huge story on us. They put us on the cover. They had this huge article. You know, the guy who was the editor of Film Threat came out and did everything himself. You know, he spent 5 or 6 days with us and interviewed everybody, was on set. And so when that came out, that was kind of the big letting the comic world know this movie is being made right now, you know? Absolutely. And so then the buzz started. And so by the time we got done, we were then starting to get invites to go to the different Comic-Cons. And I think one of the first and biggest was the LA Comic-Con, if I remember right. In fact, I couldn't even be there. I had just gotten married and we were off on our honeymoon kind of thing, you know, and I'm like, I'm not going to any Comic-Con, you know, I'm going and hanging out with my wife. And so they had the Fantastic Three for that one, you know, but so word is now getting out. And then next thing you know, they cut a trailer and the trailer actually starts showing up in theaters. And I don't know if you've seen the trailer.
Really?
The trailer's actually pretty. It's cool. You can just go on YouTube and
Yeah, I've seen the movie and I've seen Dune.
Yeah.
I haven't
the
seen
trailer is actually pretty awesome.
That's
and
awesome.
And so then they somebody started talking about, well, we're going to do a premiere at the Mall of America in Bloomington, and just outside the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And we've got charity tie-ins with Ronald McDonald House for the kids. And the movie was supposed to come out in January of, I think, 94 and or something like that. And so everybody's like starting to gear up. Michael probably told you he hired a press person, to kind of help out with things. And
next, I'm going to have to ask him about that.
Yeah, ask him about that. He was pitching in some of his own money to make some of these things happen too. And so we literally were, I think, a couple of months out from that when Ole called us all and said, the movie's gone. We're like, what are you talking about, Ole? He goes, it's shelved. It's gone. It's not going to see the light of day. It's gone. We're like, whoa, hold on. What? And he further explained that he actually was finally locked out of the editing room. He had basically finished the movie.
Yeah.
I think it hadn't been like color corrected and stuff, and they were still working on effects stuff. But he was able to have his own like 3/4 inch copy, before they locked him out and parted off the negative, right? So like literally the movie's gone. He has no access to it, except he's got this his own copy. And so he said, he says, I have no idea. I have no idea why. All I know is it's not coming out. They've pulled the plug.
Wow.
So it was at that time, then we're all shocked. We're just in shock, but because enough people in the comic world knew about it, slowly but surely people started to want to know what happened. And so over the course of literally 30 years, people started doing articles then, whether it was LA Times or whether it was some comic magazine or some, I think at about the 10-year mark, we did this big interview there for Los Angeles magazine, where they even got Roger Corman to talk about it. And then we kept doing these. And so we're with all of these interviews, you're starting to put together the pieces of this puzzle that nobody kind of understood. And so it starts to become a little clearer, a little more, okay, this is what happened. And then the final piece of the puzzle was I guess it's been at least 10, 15 years now since we made the documentary Dune. Did you see that?
I did see that. I've seen it a couple times.
So we made that, and that was really cool to be able to now take all of these pieces and try to put them together and see if we can fully understand. And I think it does a good job of doing that, and explaining, why it got pulled. And I think my final take, and it's funny because we can't ask Bernd Eichinger because he's passed away, so we can't even ask him what his intention was. But from what I see and have heard, he had the rights. He needed to go into production by a certain date in 92, or else he was going to lose the rights. And so he goes to Roger Corman, says, can you make this movie and make it cheap and make it quick? And Roger says, absolutely. And so I think both of them put up money for it, and it ended up being like $1 million budget, which for Roger Corman was actually a big budget. His stuff is like 500 and under,
Yeah.
And so we go into production, and Bernd didn't just want to go into production and then stop and just so he can maintain the rights and not finish the movie. He wanted to finish the movie because at the end of the day, like we said, these aren't proven commodities yet, the comic movies. And so he wanted to have a finished product. And so he could do one of two things then. He can keep turning around and trying to sell the rights to somebody else, right? And I think he already knew that there was some interest by Chris Columbus and 20th Century Fox. Or if nobody's interested, he still has a movie and he can release it if he wants to. So he was going to kind of win either way, Yeah. And so And so, that's why we finish the movie, and then when we get to, he has the whole next year to kind of shop it around and see if somebody's interested. And yes, Chris Columbus, 20th Century Fox. And so now they then, and I don't know how Marvel figures back into that. I don't know, if they were a part of that deal too, or what, but whoever buys it gets our movie. Right. Because it was Burnt's movie. So that was part of the deal, was they're going to get the movie. And when we did that Los Angeles Magazine interview, they did reach out to Avi Arad, who was the head of Marvel at the time. And Avi just bagged it and just said unkind things. And he's like, that's, piece of junk. I got it and I burnt the negative, and it's like, you're an idiot.
Yeah, my years of loving film and comic books, that is a name I know all too well.
Totally. Well, he didn't burn any negative,
No.
In fact, we believe that there's a copy of it that's with the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. We've done some research, and it appears that there is a copy, an actual film copy there in their vault. And so
best place it could be.
Exactly. Exactly. That was kind of the deal. So Burnt sells the rights, and they're going to make their big budget, and so they pull ours. They pull the plug on it.
So annoying that happens. But then I think, like, how
would. But here's the thing about that. Let me jump in and say here, my take is this: if the movie had come out back then in 1994, I mean, it would have gotten panned, I think, as a whole, because it would have been held to a different standard. It would have been held to the standard of Superman. It would have been held to the standard of Batman.
That's true.
And I think it would have come out and it would have gone. And that's the last anyone would have heard of it. And then they'd go on to the other ones. But because it didn't come out, you and I are sitting here talking about it over 30 years later.
That's very true. And I have made a lot of friends from this experience of all of these interviews and chatting with you guys as well. So it's, in a way, I have to count my blessings for that, because it has been quite an experience kind of uncovering this whole world of film and television with a movie that I really care about, and bring both my loves of film and superheroes. Like, it's been quite the experience. But when I found out that the movie existed, and then when I even spoke with Oli, and I spoke with Glenn, I spoke with everyone about what it was like to for them, I guess, save the film, but for someone like me discovering it, what was it like for you when you found like that your movie's out there? Like, did you watch it immediately when you found out, or?
Well, like I said, Oli had given us a copy, so we were able to watch it fairly soon, in like, say, 1994. But what was exciting was, I remember I think it was like the Stockton Comic-Con, because we were still getting invites over the years to go to different cons and things. And so, I ended up at the Stockton Con, and I'd heard about the bootleg copies. And sure enough, I'm walking around at the vendors, and I would say, "Do you have Fantastic Four?" And they'd show it to me, and it's on a VHS, kind of deal. Like, sweet.
That's awesome.
Cool. and Oli said it. He says this in I think in Doomed. He says, I'm convinced what happened was, he said, when I had my copy, I went down to Alpha Cine and I had copies made for all of you guys and stuff. And he says, I'm sure some lab technician was in the back copying it, going, "Oh my word, this is the Fantastic Four. I need to make a few copies for myself," And next thing you know, it starts getting out there into the bootleg. Awesome. And I think that's the thing then that we've always wanted, was some acknowledgement that a movie was made. I mean, you make a movie for people to see the movie. Absolutely. And the fact that it not only wasn't getting seen, but it was, like I said, when Arad was at Marvel, they didn't want to have anything to do with us. Stan Lee tried to distance himself from it. Stan Lee showed up to our set with donuts for everybody on one of the days.
That's awesome.
So that was the kind of treatment, and all we've ever wanted was, one, to have some kind of acknowledgement, and two, it would be great. We always thought if Marvel would release it, even if they put it on one of the old DVDs from their other ones, as a special.
Yeah.
And now throw it on Disney Plus, let the fans actually, I mean, they can see it because they can get a copy of it. It's not that difficult to do, but let it be public, let it go out there. And that would be, I think, the last last thing that would be just a kind of a straw in the cap, would
Yeah.
if they would do something. I mean, believe me, we're all so thrilled. We're just thrilled beyond belief. The downside was that it was just the four of us. Joseph Culp has been a part of our group.
Oh yeah.
Throughout the years. And so it was like, oh, maybe they'll give him a cameo in the new Avengers, where you see Doctor Doom. That'd be sweet.
Joseph is honestly like the best. I mean, I wouldn't be talking to you if it wasn't for his kindness and his openness to
He's great.
Reach out to you guys, reach out to everyone. He's just so great. And I love that he started that petition to get that movie finally released as well. Like I need that to happen. But I love that the film is getting so much attention now than it ever has. I love that you guys are getting the attention you deserve for what you've done, because I mean, like it, for all of its maybe like hamminess or its pulp comicness of it all. Sorry, the glare from my windows is crazy right now. But you guys really gave such a fun movie, and I think it's, even if the movie didn't come out, I think it's really become such a defining positive point in all of your careers, and that's something that no one can take away for no dollar amount.
Totally,
that's the best part.
Totally.
Now, because I know we're coming up on the hour here, and I do like to always not just to also talk about what you are doing and what you've done. And I, in researching you and just kind of looking into things, I found that you're also a pastor, correct?
I'm only a pastor. Exactly. So the Lord just kind of took my life in a completely different direction. And I knew that he was calling me into full-time ministry. And so in 2003, I basically, left the industry and went to seminary, and then did 4 years of seminary. And then I took a church up in the northwest corner of California, was there for 13 years. And then an opportunity opened up at the church that my wife and I both were attending and had gotten saved at down here in Burbank. And so I came back 4.5 years ago, and I'm the lead pastor at this church, Calvary Bible Church, in beautiful downtown Burbank. And I love it. So once an actor, always an actor. I mean, it never leaves you, right? It's in your blood. So I've always had things that I've done, even when I was up in Northern California, where I was directing theater plays and school plays. It was a small mountain community that we lived. And even right now, my one of my cool things is I have this group at church called Cast and Crew. Mm-hmm. And so it's a fellowship group for other industry people in our church, because our church is in the media capital of the world, Burbank. Yeah. So I've got animators, and I've got editors, and I've got actors and actresses, and I've got stunt people, and I've got administrative people that work on studio lots, and blah, 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 blah. And so it's a rough industry to be a Christian. It can be, a lot of industries can be rough towards Christianity, but the film industry is definitely one of them. And I wanted to have something that would encourage people, a place that they could come, gather, share their stories, talk about how, challenges or triumphs, and how can we pray for each other, and how can we encourage each other as Christians in the industry. So that's been really cool. In fact, we just had a neat thing happen on Saturday, to where we hosted, there's a group called the International Christian Film and Music Festival. So it's kind of the biggest Christian film festival that's out there, and they're based out of Orlando. And they do these little satellites. Is that where you're at? Yeah.
My fiance works at Universal Studios. She actually sets up some of the acts for Rock the Universe.
Oh, wow. Right on. A little quick side note, my daughter was just down there. She did the Disney College Intern Program. And so she was in Orlando from January. We picked her up in May. We were out there.
Very cool.
So I think it was May. So anyway, so they do these little mini conferences. And so we hosted this conference on a Saturday, where now we had all these other people from the entertainment industry, Christians in the entertainment industry, come from all different places, from San Diego and from Northern California, and this, that, and the other. And we just got to play host, and I was a speaker, and several of my pals were speakers, and it was kind of like my Cast and Crew group, just a little bit larger, kind of on steroids there. And so it's great. So I have this way that I can still use my love and desire for acting and for the industry. And a friend of mine he was one of the speakers. He it runs the cinema department at a Christian university here in Los Angeles that all my kids attended. And so he'll ask me to come and join up with some of their student films, because he likes to have working professionals with the students. So the students get a better flavor for how things really work in the world there, you know. And
Absolutely.
so I'll do things like that. Yeah.
That's so cool. I think that's such an inspirational thing, you know, giving back. There's no greater feeling than giving.
Totally.
And yeah, I personally, I grew up Catholic, but kind of like not super Catholic. But then when I met my fiance, she's Christian, and I kind of like I prefer the Christian perspective a lot more than Catholic for many reasons. But I find that it's there's always reminders out there of like faith and the importance of it in the world. And I am the type of person, I think faith is the most important thing. It's what keeps us going when we have nothing left. And so, you know, I gotta say, I think you're doing something really special, especially like you said, it's hard to be a Christian in Hollywood. And I think that it's very good that you're bringing that to people and letting them know, you know, it's okay. It's okay to want to just do things for the right reason, be a good person, give back. And I think that that's fantastic. It's a very special movie. I think that, and it's nice that they decided to tell the story of their first child. And I thought all of that is so important, because to me, it's why I love those characters. It's defining the fact that they are family before everything else. And I like the idea that like they never even like, aside from Reed being the man he is and the logical person he is, and I can understand being a logical person. Aside from entertaining the thought for a thought experiment, they never would have done that. Never would have given him to Galactus. And I'm just like, you know what? I think that compared with the movie, even like Superman, the idea of hope and faith and family. And it's like, those are those core values that even when we are at our most frustrated are so important. And I think that it's cool that superhero movies are kind of getting away from, and I love a dark superhero, don't get me wrong, but I like when the ones who shouldn't be aren't.
Good point. Well said, brother.
Jay, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's been such a blast. I was so excited to have this interview, and you did not disappoint. So thank you so much.
Right on, brother. glad to be here, Nick.
No worries. And everyone, I hope you guys had a great time listening or watching. And I hope that, you know, Jay, I hope you have a great day. Everyone out there, I hope you guys have a great day, rest of your evening, whatever it is. And everyone take care.